Have you ever heard a sound so piercing it yanks you right out of your thoughts? That's exactly what happened to me. I was stretched out in the living room, savoring one of those rare, peaceful afternoons when a loud crack ripped through the air. The glass shook so violently I nearly leapt out of my chair. My gut reaction was that someone was breaking in. I snatched up my phone and rushed toward the noise, my pulse hammering, only to discover my front window split straight across the middle. And right there in my yard stood the culprit, Karen's son, Ryan. His fist clenched around a handful of rocks like he was practicing for some demolition competition. The kid didn't flinch. No guilt, no apology, not even the slightest hint of fear. Instead, he just tossed me a careless shrug like it was the most normal thing in the world. But when I stormed outside and demanded to know what he thought he was doing, he gave me this smug little grin. The kind of grin that only comes from a teenager who's never been told no in his life. He mumbled something about being bored and bolted before I could get another word out. I was still standing there staring at my broken window in disbelief when his mother, Karen herself, came barreling across the street. Her arms were flying around like she was auditioning for a drama performance, and instead of concern or even a simple apology, she jabbed a finger in my direction and shouted, "You owe my son a new phone!" I just stood there, stunned. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, half certain I'd misheard. But no, she was dead serious. Turns out, Ryan had dropped his phone while he was busy pelting my house with rocks, and the screen shattered. And according to her twisted logic, I was somehow responsible for the damage. I nearly laughed from shock. "Let me get this straight. Your son smashes my window and I'm supposed to buy him a new phone?" I asked. She lifted her chin, folded her arms, and gave me a look that could curdle milk. "If you hadn't upset him last week by yelling at him to stay off your lawn, he wouldn't have been angry enough to throw rocks in the first place. This is on you." My jaw dropped. The entitlement was so thick you could choke on it. I told her she should be grateful I wasn't already on the phone with the police, but Karen just smirked, promised she'd make sure I paid one way or another, and stalked off with Ryan dragging his feet behind her. That's when I realized this wasn't finished. Karen wasn't the type to back down quietly, and I had a sinking feeling she was about to make things a whole lot messier. Sure enough, the next morning I found a note taped to my front door, scrawled in her messy handwriting. It read, $600 for a new iPhone. Pay by Friday or I'll take action. No greeting, no explanation, just a demand, like she thought she was running some mob operation. I stood there gripping the paper, rereading it in disbelief. $600 for her son's recklessness? It would have been laughable if it hadn't made my blood boil. What really got under my skin was the arrogance of assuming I'd just cave in. She clearly didn't know who she was dealing with. That afternoon, as I swept up the last shards of glass still clinging to the window frame, Karen came stomping across the street again. No hello, no small talk, just straight to business. "So," she said, arms crossed and foot tapping, "when are you paying for Ryan's phone?" I set the broom aside and faced her head on. "Karen, let me spell this out for you. I'm not giving you a cent. Your son damaged my property. If anyone owes money here, it's you." Her eyes narrowed, and her voice got louder, sharp enough for the whole block to hear. "If you don't buy him a replacement, I'll call the police and tell them you threatened him. I'll say you scared him so badly he dropped his phone." For a moment, I couldn't even speak. The audacity was unreal. But then it hit me. This was bigger than a broken window or a busted phone. Karen had been pulling stunts like this for years. She was infamous on the block for her constant drama, complaining about garbage cans, ranting about cars parked near her driveway, even picking fights over Halloween decorations being too spooky. And now she had decided to turn her sights fully on me. This time, though, Karen had gone further than I ever expected. I couldn't help but laugh, which only seemed to fuel her rage. "Go on," I said. "Call them. Let's see how that works out for you." She stomped off, tossing threats over her shoulder, promising I'd regret standing my ground. And I'll admit her words stuck with me. The idea of her fabricating some wild tale for the police wasn't far-fetched. Karen had pulled stunts like that before. Sure enough, 2 nights later, I spotted her out on her porch, phone glued to her ear, her eyes locked on me as she spoke. I couldn't hear her, but the smug grin stretched across her face told me everything I needed to know. Karen wasn't bluffing, she was following through. And I had a gut feeling the cops would be knocking on my door any minute. Right after dinner it happened. A solid, deliberate knock echoed through my house. Not friendly, not casual. Authoritative. My stomach dropped. When I opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood there. Across the street, Karen and Ryan peeked through their curtains, grinning like they were watching their favorite reality show. "Sir," one officer said, "we received a call about a disturbance. A minor claims you threatened him after he accidentally damaged your property. Can we come in to talk?" I almost laughed at how fast Karen had flipped the story. "Of course, officers," I said, keeping calm. "Come on in. I've got nothing to hide." I laid out the entire sequence, how Ryan had been hurling rocks at my window, how I caught him red-handed, how Karen demanded I replace his phone, and how she warned me she'd call the police if I didn't. I even showed them the cracked glass still taped up, the note she'd plastered to my door, and the small pile of rocks still littering the lawn. The officers listened carefully, asking pointed questions. One of them frowned. "So you're saying he deliberately threw rocks at your house?" "Exactly," I replied. "And when his phone broke during his tantrum, his mother decided it was somehow my responsibility. Since then, she's been harassing me." The 2 officers exchanged a glance, and I recognized it instantly. They'd dealt with Karen before. One sighed. "This isn't the first complaint we've had from that address." Relief washed over me. I wasn't alone in this. But just as the tension eased, Karen herself stormed across the street with Ryan in tow. She barged right in without so much as a knock, her voice booming. "There he is!" she shrieked, jabbing a finger at me like she was delivering a courtroom accusation. "That's the man who scared my baby and made him drop his phone. Arrest him!" The officers remained stone-faced. "Ma'am," one said evenly, "we've already spoken with your neighbor. His account is backed by evidence. Unless you have proof he threatened your son, we can't act on your claim." Karen's face flushed crimson. She sputtered, waving her arms wildly, insisting Ryan would never lie. But beside her, Ryan kept his head down, eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't nod. He didn't speak up. He just stayed silent, and that silence screamed louder than anything Karen was saying, her face twisted into desperation. "You don't get it," she rambled. "He's always mean to my son, intimidating, glaring, telling Ryan what to do." The officers stood their ground, voices firm now. "What we do understand," one replied, "is that your son vandalized his neighbor's property. That's criminal mischief. If we wanted, we could cite you as his guardian." Karen froze like someone had slapped her. For the first time, her confidence cracked. She glanced at Ryan, then back at the officers. "Wait, are you saying I could be charged?" "Yes, ma'am," the officer confirmed. "Property damage is a serious matter. He may be a minor, but you're accountable for his actions. And that note demanding money?" He gestured toward the paper. "That could easily be considered harassment, even extortion." I almost smiled. After all her posturing and finger-pointing, reality was finally catching up to her. Karen immediately shifted gears, her tone crumbling from bossy to pleading. No, that's not what I meant." "The note, it was just a misunderstanding." "I wasn't serious." The officers weren't buying it. "Regardless, this ends here. You'll cover the cost of repairing your neighbor's window. And if we get another false report or harassment, we'll press charges." She made one last desperate attempt. But what about my son's phone? Who's paying for that?" The officer shot her a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "That's on you. He broke it while damaging someone else's property. Actions have consequences. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt justice was finally on my side." Karen's bravado evaporated, leaving her muttering bitterly as she dragged Ryan back across the street. The officers handed me their card, told me to call if there were more issues, and gave one final warning glance at Karen's house before heading out. The street was quieter after that. Ryan never set foot on my property again, and Karen avoided me entirely, pretending not to see me when she grabbed the mail. The broken window got replaced. Paid for out of her pocket, not mine. And that shiny phone she wanted replaced? I later spotted Ryan outside, fiddling with an old flip phone. Not exactly the outcome Karen wanted, but definitely the reality check they both needed. In the end, the lesson was clear. Entitlement might be loud, but when the truth shows up at your door, even Karen has no choice but to back down. And if you enjoyed this wild HOA Karen saga, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment about your own crazy neighbor stories, and subscribe with the bell on so you never miss another wild neighborhood showdown.